Hey designers, my name is Erin Sedra and I am a college-level graphic design instructor. I've been teaching graphic design since 2021, so I'm really excited to start my own YouTube channel. In this first video, I will be teaching you how to navigate Photoshop, and I'm teaching it with the approach that you have never opened Photoshop and you are a brand new beginner. So I go as slow as I can, I try to take a step-by-step approach, and I keep accessibility in mind, hoping that my video can be inclusive to many types of learners. I try to speak loudly, include closed captions, I highlight different areas to make sure they're visible, I zoom in, so hopefully you can see all the little buttons in the interface really clearly. I specifically make these videos supplemental to my college classes, so the order of the videos correspond with my curriculum, and while my college students are my main audience here, any independent learner is welcome. By the end of this video, there will be a tutorial on how to create a pop art-inspired poster from a photo. So if you watch till the end, you'll get to finish it off with a fun tutorial. So welcome, this is my first video. I'm hoping that every week I get better and better at this. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a tutorial. Let's get started.
When you open Photoshop, this is the screen that you will see. The first skill we are going to learn is how to create a new file. This is different from opening an existing image, which we will practice later. So to create a new file, there's a few ways you can do that. You can hover over this button and click New File, or you can go up to the menu bar and click File, and right away you'll see New. In every menu, you will see keyboard shortcuts listed on the right side of the menu. So to use a keyboard shortcut, you will use Command-N on a Mac or Control-N on a PC. And the keyboard shortcuts will help you create a new file instantly. So let's go ahead and click File New or hit Command-N. And now the new document window should pop right open. At the top here, you're going to find a range of presets. I usually stick with the Recent tab and just work with the custom files that I've already created myself. So let's go ahead and take a look at the right side of the document under Preset Details. We're going to name this Practice File. For units, I typically work in pixels or inches. I'll generally use centimeters or millimeters if I'm working with an international company because they use the metric system. Points and picas are rarely used. Let's stick with pixels, and let's create a file that is 1920 by 1080 pixels. And you can just double click here and then type in the width and the height. The orientation is going to be landscape, so let's check that. Portrait is just a taller artboard and landscape is a longer artboard. And the reason why we're using 1920 by 80 pixels is because it's the size of most standard HD monitors. Now let's set the resolution. Resolution refers to the level of detail in an image. A higher resolution produces sharper results, but also increases the file size. Large, high-resolution images may load slowly online, so it's important to balance clarity with performance. We'll explore resolution in more detail in a future video. For now, let's set the resolution at 300 ppi, which stands for pixels per inch, and go ahead and hit Create. Now that we've created a document, remember, it is not saved yet. One of the first things I recommend is saving right away. To do this, you can go to File and then Save As, or use the shortcut Command-Shift-S or Control-Shift-S on a PC. So go ahead and click Save As, and this save window will pop open, and it gives you two options. You can save to Creative Cloud, which is where we're saving right now, and saving to Creative Cloud saves online and saves your work automatically as long as you are connected to Wi-Fi. You also have the option to save to your computer, and if you want to do that, you can click this button down here. And saving to your computer or your desktop saves the file locally. And if you're a college student, this option is usually best because you'll find yourself needing to upload these files to your learning management platform. Let's choose on your computer. The Save As window will appear, and by default, Photoshop saves files with the .psd extension, which you will see here. This is the Photoshop document format, and it's very important. A PSD, or a Photoshop document, keeps all your layers and edits intact so you can reopen and continue working later. If you move down here to Format, you will notice it says Photoshop here, and so that's the Photoshop format, and it corresponds with the .psd file tag. If you open up this dialog box, you'll see a variety of options that are available to you, but today we are going to stick with Photoshop. In the middle of the panel, you can choose where to save your document. If your window doesn't look like this, and maybe your window's a little smaller, all you have to do is click this drop-down arrow here, and that will open up a wider window where you can save this. Today I'm going to save mine to my desktop, and right here I have desktop selected. One important difference to remember is that Creative Cloud files auto-save and local desktop files require manual saving. So once we create this document and once we start editing it, you will periodically have to go to File, Save, or Command S. Now that our document is created and saved, let's set up the workspace. The workspace controls how panels and tools are arranged all around your artboard. So your screen probably looks very different than mine because I've customized my setup. So to make sure that we are starting from the same place, I want you to go to the top right corner and open this workspace menu. Select Essentials, you'll see that it's checked, if it is, and then go to the bottom and hit Reset Essentials. And once I hit this button, you're going to see my workspace change. All right, so my workspace just reset to Photoshop's default windows. Going back to the workspace menu, you'll see that Photoshop has several different workspaces, and these are great for different types of projects or different types of professions. Illustrators might prefer the painting workspace, while photographers would prefer the photography workspace. You can also create your own workspace and customize it, but personally, I always start with the Essentials workspace and customize it from there. Panels are organized windows that control specific properties, tools, and features in Photoshop. We have four main types of panels. Open panels, which are the panels that are open and visible, and right now we have color, properties, and layers as our open panels. Collapsed panels, which you'll see in this bar here, and these panels are minimized into icons along the side. You can open them just by clicking. Floating panels are panels that you have detached from your dock, and hidden panels are panels that are not visible until you open them from the menu. Let's explore these. Click the top History panel in the collapsed bar. You will notice that it's grouped with another panel called Comments. These are the tabs here, so let's click Comments. We're not going to use comments very much, so what you can do is click and drag comments out just by grabbing the icon. It's still collapsed, and hitting these arrows will open it up. Now, the Comments panel is a floating panel. Floating panels can be useful, but too many will clutter your workspace and, as you can see, cover your artboard. So I recommend keeping most panels docked. You can close this by clicking the X button here. If you need to open a panel that is not visible, go to the Window menu. Here, every panel is listed in alphabetical order. Let's set up our workspace by opening a few useful ones. First, let's open the Navigator. You'll notice the Navigator opened with another panel called Histogram. Histogram is very important for photographers, but not as essential for graphic designers, so I'm going to remove it and X out of it. Next, I'm going to open my layer comps panel. And layer comps also opened with another panel called notes. And we're going to close out of this one. I'm going to show you another way to close out of it. Instead of dragging it out into a floating panel, you can just click this hamburger menu and hit close or close tab group. If you close tab group, it's going to close both the notes and the layer comps. So we're just going to hit close to close the selected menu. Now you know two ways of closing a panel. We're going to grab, let's see, some type panels. Let's grab character. And character opens with paragraph, and we want both of those. Notice how they're grouped together, and you can see the groups are separated by these lines. We're also going to grab brush and brush settings, and those two open together as well. I don't use these a lot, but when you need them, you need them. You can grab the top of each group and move them down, and you're going to start to see these blue lines appear. You're going to want to experiment with them. You can add these to another group, or you can put them above or below a group. I'm going to put the brush and brush settings towards the bottom. I don't use them very much. I use the navigator quite a bit, so I'm going to put that at the top. I would like to have my layer comps grouped with my history. So right now they open individually. I would like them to be a tab group. So I'm going to click and drag my layer comps and put it into the history box, which turns blue. And now you can see that they're in a tab group together. So when I open layer comps and history are together. In fact, I'm going to move history so it is before layer comps because I like that. Finally, we're going to move color, swatches, gradients, and patterns off of the open panels and into the collapsed bar. The layers panel and the properties panel are two of the most important panels. So I want them visible without being crowded by other panels, especially because I'm working on a smaller screen. If I was working on my larger screen, I wouldn't mind having these open, but I'm on my laptop right now, so I want more space for properties and for layers. So let's drag these here. We'll put color. I actually do not want patterns. I never use patterns. So let's go ahead and close that. And we're going to put swatches down here. Swatches is really important, and gradients is pretty important. And I want the colors to be above my type group. So let's put them here. Go ahead and experiment with moving icons around. Sometimes that can be tricky, and sometimes you accidentally move them into places you don't want them to go, and it just takes some practice. All right, one last thing. You can adjust this collapsible taskbar to make it a little wider. And so as we hover over it, you'll see this arrow start to pop up. And you can click and drag this so it's wider. And the reason why I like doing this is because you get to see the labels of each of these panels. If you are a beginner, I would recommend leaving this open just a little wider, so that way you can get familiar with the names and the icons. As you advance, it'll probably be very easy for you to remember what the icons look like, but for starters, let's have these open. I'm also going to drag these open panels and make them a little smaller so I have more room in my artboard. And just kind of do what works for you. You want enough space to see your artboard, but you also want to have access to your most important windows. On the left side of the screen is the toolbar. Like other panels, you can move it and even close it. If you click and grab this top gray area, now it's a floating panel. That X button right there closes the toolbar. If you accidentally close it, which happens to me more than I care to admit, you can reopen it by going to Window and then Tools. At the top, this double arrow lets you toggle between a single column or two columns of tools. Personally, I prefer having two columns of tools, and I also prefer keeping the toolbar anchored to the left side of my screen. So as I move it, you'll see this blue highlight appear, and I just need to let go. And there is my toolbar anchored in with two columns. To use a tool, click once to select it. Let's start with the type tool, which icon is this letter T. Click it once. Now you can click and drag on your artboard to create a text box. It immediately fills with lorem ipsum, and you're going to notice a couple things. One, a new text layer is added to your layers panel. This is Photoshop's most important panel since every graphic you make is built on layers. Second, the properties panel has changed and it automatically updates to show your typography options. So let's type something in and play with the properties. I love graphic design. Here in the properties panel, you can change the font. And if I pick a font, notice how it didn't change? That's because I need to highlight the text. So you can highlight it by clicking and dragging, or I like to just click Command A on my keyboard, and that highlights all the text in a text box. So once you do that, go ahead and pick a typeface. I'm going to pick Menno Banner. I'm going to change the size. It doesn't matter. We're not creating a really pretty design here. We're just exploring. So watch what I did. I double-clicked color, and my color picker appeared. And maybe I just want this to be black. You will see that the text is too big for the bounding box, and this plus sign appears that shows that there's some hidden text. So all I need to do is make my bounding box bigger, and there is more of my text. Once you're done, you can go up and look at this little check mark, and that check mark means you're done. And let's click that. Going back to the toolbar, you're going to see about 22 tool icons. However, there are actually many more icons. Every icon with this little arrow indicates that there are additional tools underneath the top tool. So all you have to do is click and hold. So let's click and hold the type tool. And now 3 more tools pop up, and let's grab the vertical type tool. I'm going to click and drag. I accidentally interrupted this layer. Let me click it again. And now we have some vertical type. It's really big, taking up a lot of space. So let's adjust the properties in the properties panel. I'm going to type my name. Maybe I want it to be much bolder, or I want a different font altogether. And why isn't it changing? Because I didn't highlight my text. So let's hit Command A, and now let's change this up. All right, and let's hit our check mark. So now you'll see that I have 2 text layers in my layers panel. They automatically name the text layers what you've typed in. However, you can double click and rename this. We can name it text box 1. You can name things whatever works for you, whatever helps you to stay organized. Anyways, going back to the toolbar, you're now going to notice that the vertical type tool has replaced the horizontal type tool as the face tool. Moving down, you can view all the tools at your disposal or edit your toolbar by holding down these 3 dots and clicking Edit Toolbar. Here you're going to see every tool and the group that it's in. So, for example, if you're looking for your elliptical marquee tool here, but you can't find it, you can look here and you'll notice that it's sitting right under the rectangle marquee tool, and it corresponds there. On the right side of each tool, you're also going to see all these keyboard shortcuts, these letters. So if we look at our Move tool, the keyboard shortcut that corresponds with the Move tool is V. So let's give that a try. Going to click Done. And now to select the Move tool, I'm going to hit V on my keyboard, and my cursor changed, and now I have my Move tool. And I can click Elements and move them around. Now that our workspace is set up and we've played with a few tools, we are going to learn the difference between placing and opening an image in Photoshop. Now there's an image you can download in the description to use for this tutorial. I already have a few images ready to go on my desktop so that I can show you how to do this. If you already have a file open like we do now, all you need to do is go to File, Place, and you'll notice that you have 2 options. You have File, Place Embedded, which copies the image into your document. This increases the file size, but the image is always available in this Photoshop document, even if the original file is moved from your desktop or deleted entirely. Now, Place Linked creates a live connection from the Photoshop document to wherever the image is stored on your computer. This keeps your Photoshop file smaller, but the link will break if you move the file or delete it. So that's why it's really important to have organized folders and have a place for everything, because if you keep moving files around and they're linked, you can lose that connection. In general, I will use Place Embedded when working with smaller projects that only have 1 or 2 images, and I will use Place Linked when I'm working with maybe large multi-image or multi-page documents. And when using Place Linked, you just need to make sure that your image assets are organized and stay in their proper place. For today, let's try Place Embedded. The Place Embedded window pops up, showing me my desktop, and I have a portrait image ready to go, and this is the image available for you to download. And all I have to do is hit place. And the image places directly on my artboard. You'll notice immediately there is a bounding box, so you can scale it immediately. If I click and hold down, you'll notice that it does not scale proportionally. It will scale proportionally if you simultaneously hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. That keeps an image proportional, and that is pretty important. You can also use this link right here, which is essentially that Shift key, and make sure that that is on. And once that's on, you don't have to hold down Shift. And once you have the image at a size and place, you can rotate the image. Once you have it at whatever orientation you want, you can hit the check mark and click OK. You'll notice that my name, Erin, is sitting on top of the image, and that this text box here is sitting behind the image. And the reason why that's happening is because of the position of the layers. So look in the layers panel and play around with reordering these layers. See how I drag my name and now we can't see it anymore because it's behind the image? And now you can drag it above it. So sometimes if you're working with a Photoshop file and you think you've lost something, it could just be hidden under a different layer. Anyways, now let's talk about opening an image, which is different than placing an image. There are several ways to open an image in Photoshop. The first way is going to File, Open, or Command O, and click that. And it's going to give me all of my files on my desktop, and I'm going to grab the same portrait image and just click Open. And now it's opened in a new tab. There's no white artboard around it. You just have the image. You can also open an image in Photoshop without having Photoshop open at all. You can grab an image, and here I have a different image, and you can right-click it and go to Open With, and you have all these different options that you can open it with the preview being your default, and we can just click Open with Photoshop. And now another image has opened in Photoshop. The final way you can do this, and probably my favorite way, I just think this is kind of fun, you can click the icon on the desktop and drag it to the Photoshop app and just let go. And now you've opened another image in Photoshop. You will see here that all of these tabs are now open. And these are all your different working files in Photoshop. If you want to close out a tab, all you have to do is hit that X button and close a tab. You can even pull a tab out, and then you will have a floating window. Sometimes people like that. I don't personally like working with that. You can go to Window, Arrange, and if you want to see your images right next to each other, you can choose how to tile them, tiling them either vertically or horizontally. To reset it, you can hit Consolidate to all tabs. You can even move tabs around, so you can have one in front of the other to work how you want to work. So going back to our practice file, let's take a look at these two squares here, which are your foreground and background color. These are considered your two active colors in Photoshop, with the foreground being the default. You can double click either of these swatches to change the color. So if I double click the foreground, I can pick any color. You can use this slider here to grab a color. And if you scroll off the color picker, you will notice that your cursor changes to an eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool allows you to grab colors from the document. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a more saturated color so you guys can really see what we're about to do. And let's go ahead and change our background color as well. We'll do just a green and a red. So now if you open the gradient panel, which is in your collapsed bar, under basic gradients, the basic gradient will always pull from your foreground or background color. So if we change the foreground or background color and hit OK, you'll notice that the basic gradients have changed. You can also swap your foreground and background color using this little arrow icon here. I'm going to click that, and now we've swapped them. And now let's test our foreground and background color by creating a new layer and filling it. So go ahead and click this plus sign down here, and that has added a new layer that has showed up at the top of our layers panel. I'm going to double click to rename it color. And now let's go to Edit, Fill. And this dialog box pops up, and we can choose to fill it with any of these options, the first of the options being our foreground or background color. So let's click our foreground color and hit OK. And now the whole layer has been filled with our foreground color. I'm going to move this all the way down so it's at the bottom. If you look at this tiny icon here, that's like a miniature version of the foreground and the background color, that resets your foreground and background color to the default black and white. So I'm going to click that. Personally, I usually keep my foreground and background color to black and white because using black and white becomes especially important when working with layer masks, which we will go over in depth in a later video. All right, so now we are going to learn how to navigate around our artboard. Oftentimes, beginners will see these little bars and try to move them up and down to navigate. Out of all of the ways that you can navigate, this is probably the least efficient way to do so. So I'm going to teach you a few different ways, and we're going to start with how to zoom. If you are on a laptop with a trackpad, you can pinch your fingers in and out on the trackpad to zoom in and out. You can also use the key Command plus and Command minus, and that will help you zoom in and out in different increments. I really like using the key command. You can grab the zoom tool, which is in the shape of the magnifying glass, and click that. And if you click and drag to the right, you'll zoom in. If you click and drag to the left, you'll zoom out. If you hover over one specific area and click over and over and over again, you can zoom in. And then to zoom out, while clicking with this zoom tool, you just hold down the Alt or Option key and see how the magnifying glass changes from a plus to a minus. Now we can zoom out. I also really like the navigator panel. So in the navigator panel, you'll see this cursor at the bottom, and you can just click and drag to zoom way out and way in. And you'll notice that as you zoom out and in, this red box is changing size. And what this red box is it's your viewport, and it represents the part of the composition that you can see on your screen. You can edit the color of the box to something more visible to you. So personally, I actually prefer the green color because I can just see that better. So you can do what works for you. Once you're zoomed in at the level you want, you can grab that green box and use it to pan around your design. Let's say you want to zoom right into her face. We're going to move our green box over to her face. And there we have it. We're panning around. If you don't want to use the navigator tool to pan around, you can also hit the space bar. Your cursor changes to a hand, and you can move around your composition like so. All right, let's move on to the next chapter. now we are going to talk about the options bar, contextual taskbar, and the status bar. The options bar is this context-sensitive toolbar located just below your menu and above your working tabs. You will notice that every time I select a different tool, the options bar changes to show me the different features that tool has. It's kind of similar to the properties panel, but while the options bar responds to the active tool, the properties panel updates when you select different layers or different elements on the artboard. So let's grab some text and you'll see the artboards panel open up the typography of that specific text. If I grab an image in the layers panel, now it's telling me all the properties of the image, including the size of the image and the angle of the image. So let's go ahead and use the brush tool as an example. The brush tool is just this paintbrush, and so I'm going to click that. And when selected, the options bar changed to display all of the brush settings. So we're going to go ahead and click this drop-down arrow to change the brush size and the brush hardness. The hardness controls the edge of the brush. Softer edges blend more, while harder edges are more defined. Let's get something in the middle so you can see the brush softness. If you have your caps lock turned on, that will hide your brush cursor. So if you can't see your brush cursor, make sure your caps lock is turned off. I'm going to increase the size so you can see this better. See how you can see my brush cursor? Now you can't because caps lock is on. Make sure caps lock is not on. So we're going to go ahead and paint something. And you will notice that it automatically started painting black, which is the foreground color. And we can change the color, one, by double clicking and grabbing a color and hitting OK. Or we can even go under our swatches panel, open up swatches, and pick any color. So you can customize your swatches panel. Right now, all of my recent swatches are at the top, so I'm just going to grab one of these and start painting with it. But under this hamburger menu, you have some swatch options. If you like larger thumbnails, if you need help kind of seeing these thumbnails, you can make them larger. You can make them smaller. I highly recommend that you keep your show recents selected. What that does, if I deselect it, it doesn't show me the recent swatches I've used. I find it really helpful when Photoshop shows me the recent swatches I've used because oftentimes I go back to them over and over again. Let's go ahead and change our brush hardness to 100%. You'll be able to see the difference here. See the hard edges? All right, so I really messed up my canvas, so I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to rename it brushes, and I'm going to move it behind everything else so that way it's not sitting in front. All right, moving on to the contextual taskbar, which is down here. The contextual taskbar is a relatively new feature in Photoshop. Now, sometimes the taskbar kind of moves around as you're working and it might get in the way of certain things that you're doing, and as you zoom in, it kind of stays with you. To avoid the taskbar getting in the way of your work, you can hit these three dots, more options, and click pin bar position. I already had mine pinned. And then wherever you put it is just where it stays. And so that's a really nice feature on the taskbar. This bar works similarly to the properties panel, updating based on whatever selection you have. So if I go ahead and click my text box, you'll see that the contextual taskbar is giving me some immediate text options. And I can go ahead and change my text really quickly here. But let's go ahead and take a look at our portrait. We're going to click the portrait, and the taskbar immediately gives us some image options. So I'm going to click Select Subject. It's going to take a little while to load. Once that loads, you will see a selection appear. Now, this is kind of a rough selection. It's actually much better to manually select an image, but we'll go over that later. So what these little dots are that indicate that you have a selection are called marching ants, and these just march around whatever subject you have selected. When you have an active selection, any edits you make will only affect the selected area. So let's just say we're going to paint directly on our portrait layer, which generally not a good idea, but for context, you can see that my paintbrush is staying only within the selection. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. You can also go to Edit, Undo when you want to undo something, but Command Z is much quicker. To deselect something, you can just, on your keyboard, hit Command or Control D. Finally, the status bar is the bar at the very bottom of your program. This shows real-time information about your image, active tools, and document dimensions, file size, color profile, zoom level, etc. You're not going to use this very frequently, but it's a very handy way to quickly check your document details that you might have forgotten. So if we click this arrow, we can find out the document size, the document color profile. You can look at your layer count. It's pretty handy, and I use it occasionally. All right, there we go. We have gone over every taskbar, including the option bar, the status bar, the contextual taskbar. We've gone over our toolbar and our panels. So now you have a good idea of how to navigate your interface, and you're familiar with what everything kind of does. So let's move on to the next chapter. All right, we're going to take a quick look at Photoshop settings, also called Photoshop preferences. And these preferences are customizable options that control how the program behaves, how the interface looks, and how the tools function. Most settings generally can stay as the default settings, but there are a few worth adjusting. So before we go to settings, I want you to make sure that your rulers are visible. Now I have my rulers on. If yours are not turned on, you can quickly turn them on by hitting Command or Control R, and that will toggle your rulers on and off. You can also go to View Rulers, and it has the key command right there. So from now on, I want you guys always having your rulers on when you work. And the reason why is because the rulers allow you to quickly pull out guides. And guides are great for lining up different aspects of your design. I'll go into that more later. So let's go to Photoshop Preferences by hitting Photoshop 2025 up here, and then Settings. If you're on a PC, you will actually be going to Edit, Preferences, and then we're all going to go to General. And now we have this window, and on the left side of the window, we have all these different categories that we can adjust. So today, let's go down to Units and Rulers. Right now, my units are set to pixels. However, I can open this up and set them to inches, and when I click this, you are going to watch my rulers change in real time. You can pick whatever unit of measurement you want, and generally this changes based on whatever project I'm working on. So if I'm working on a print project and my client has me working in inches, I will set these to inches. If I'm working on something digital that's going to be viewed on a screen, I'll generally stick with pixels. It doesn't really matter. You just have to do what works for you and what makes sense for the project. All right, another useful setting is the interface appearance right here. What's nice about this is you can change the color theme of your interface. If you want a very dark theme, maybe that might be easier on your eyes, or if you like a lighter theme. I personally hate the lighter theme. This is what the old Photoshop used to look like, and it kind of reminds me of Microsoft Paint, so I don't like that. I'm pretty happy with the default. I don't mind the extra dark theme too, but either way, pick out whatever works for you. You can also change the font size in Photoshop. I've never changed my font size, but you can pick a larger font size. This will not change in real time. You'll notice down here it says changes will take effect the next time you start Photoshop. So if you wanted to play with font size, you could change it and then restart your Photoshop. And you can just kind of browse through all of these, but the reality is most of them you're gonna wanna keep as is. And then let's hit OK to get out of this window. All right, so going back to the guides that I just showed you about, I'm gonna click and drag a few more. Now that I have these guides out, we can even edit the guides by going to View Guides. You can lock guides, you can clear them. So if I hit clear guides, now they're all deleted. I can bring a few more back on. And once they're on here, if you hover over them, you can grab that and move it. Anyways, if you hit Command or Control semicolon, you can hide and clear your guide. Guides pretty much help you to line up content when you're creating an image. And if you're in my college classes and you make it to every class, one of these days, I'm gonna show you how to create diagonal guides, but I'm gonna save that for a future tutorial. And one last thing, since we've kind of touched on layers, I do wanna show you that if you select a layer here, at the very bottom, if you wanna delete a layer, you can delete layers. I'm going to delete this brush layer, so hit yes. You even have these eye icons on the left side. You can show and hide layers. This is one last good tip on how to work with layers before we get started on our pop art inspired poster. So in the next chapter, we are going to take everything we've learned thus far and make some artwork. I'll see you there. Hey everyone. Today we will be making a pop art inspired poster using artwork by Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein as inspiration. First, a little bit of history. Emerging in the UK and the US in the mid to late 1950s and peaking in the 1960s, the pop art movement challenged fine art traditions by incorporating imagery from popular culture, such as advertising, comic books, and even celebrities. Key characteristics of the movement include simplified designs, saturated colors, and the use of everyday commercial objects. Artists employed a variety of techniques. What we're seeing here today is a silkscreen and a painting. Did you know that the Photoshop software that you are working in right now is derived from older processes such as printmaking and darkroom photography? If you take a printmaking and photo class, you'll begin to notice overlapping terminology such as masking, feathering, burning, and dodging. Pop artists like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein used these older techniques to celebrate or critique consumer culture and media through their artwork. Looking at Warhol's silkscreen of Marilyn Monroe, we will be using the threshold adjustment layer in Photoshop to separate the highlights from the contours. This adjustment layer also mimics the grunge texture that we see in this print. We will also incorporate a halftone filter like we're seeing in Roy Lichtenstein's painting from 1964. This halftone texture will add a sort of comic style texture to our artwork. Remember, it's perfectly fine to take inspiration from other artists, but you should never copy someone else's work directly. Your final piece should be unique. For this exercise, we are using a public domain image from unsplash.com provided by the Good Faces agency. When using another person's image in your artwork, make sure it is public domain or that you have the artist's written consent. Oh, and a good rule of thumb is to alter the image by at least 60% to create something original. Our class exercises are protected as they fall under the fair use laws, since we're using images strictly for educational purposes. However, as you move forward in your career and create work for publication, copying someone else's work or ignoring image ethics can have serious consequences. Just ask Shepard Fairey. All right, now we are going to create our pop art inspired image. Before we get started, you will need to download the exercise image linked in the YouTube video description. I have the image right here on my desktop. In a previous video, we learned how to open an image in Photoshop by clicking and dragging the image over the Photoshop icon and dropping it in. And now we have opened the image in Photoshop. We're going to save it right away. If you are a student in my college class, I'd recommend saving it to your desktop because you may need to upload it to the learning management platform. However, if you're an independent learner, just watching for fun, save it however you want. So let's go to File, Save As. It's immediately set to a JPEG because the image itself is a JPEG. So let's change the format to Photoshop. And we will see as we change the format, the file extension will change to .psd. Once you've set it to a PSD, you'll have the option to save it to cloud documents. So if you'd rather save it to your cloud, you can do that. And you're going to rename the file. We'll do exercise image. And then we're going to hit save. Now remember, when you save files to Creative Cloud, they do save automatically as you work. However, if you save this file to your computer, to your desktop, as you make updates, you will periodically have to go to File, Save. It's grayed out now, but once you start actually making updates, you'll be able to click that. All right, so let's get started. In the contextual taskbar down here, you have this button called Select Subject. You're going to go ahead and click that. It's going to take a little while to load, but ultimately, this will select the subject of your image for you. This works best when you have a high contrast image with a dark subject and a light background, or a light subject and a dark background, so Photoshop can really detect the edges of the image. Now, there are much better ways to manually select objects with the selection tools. However, this video is aimed towards very early beginners, so I'm going to skim over this and go over selection tools more in depth in a future video. Once you have the object selected, you will see what are called marching ants that indicate the selection. And so now we're going to go to Select, and Mask. It may take a moment, but a new window is going to pop up here. All right, here we go. It's always just a little slow. So masking is a non-destructive way to hide and reveal parts of an image without deleting them. This may seem confusing now, but I will cover layer masking in depth in the future. In the Properties panel here, you'll see what's called a View mode, and you can open the View mode and look through a variety of ways to view your mask. Personally, I like to view it on black and white. Remember, with layer masking, black hides and white reveals. So part of the reason I like the black and white view is that I can see exactly what's being hidden and what's being revealed. I also like black and white because I can more easily see the texture, especially when working with curly hair, and you get to see how well the mask is revealing the texture. Speaking of the hair, there's a button up here called Refine Hair, which if you click it will give you a more accurate mask when masking textured objects. So now that I've clicked it, we get an even clearer mask refining the hair. All right, we're not gonna look too much at any of these sliders or features. Instead, we're just gonna go all the way down to Output 2, and we're gonna change this to Output 2, New Layer with Layer Mask. And then we're gonna hit OK. And if we go to our Layers panel, we'll see that Photoshop has added a second layer with a layer mask. Our background layer is still there. And if I were to click the I button, you'd see the original photo, and now you'll see the mask. I'm going to double click to rename our new layer, and I'm going to rename it Subject. All right, so moving on to adjustments. If you open your adjustments panel, you should find an adjustment called Threshold. What Threshold does is it converts your image to only black and white. White being the highlights and black being the contours. If you take the slider that you see on the histogram and move it to the left, you'll get more whites. If you move it to the right, you'll get more blacks. If you move it all the way to either side, you will eventually create a silhouette of the image, which is kind of cool. But we want something in the middle that's going to keep a nice balance of the highlights and shadows. And I'm just going to highlight this number and type in 60. I know that 60 is going to give us a nice balance. You can play around with that. Now we're going to go back to adjustments, and we are going to look for a gradient map adjustment. You're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and find the gradient map adjustment layer. You'll see that it's been added to your layers panel here, and the gradient map automatically pulled a gradient straight from your foreground and background. You can change the colors by double-clicking this bar. Now what the gradient map will do is add some colors to the image. So you can open these folders and look at basics. I actually want the darker color on the left and the lighter color on the right. You can open the blues folder and play around with what they already have. But today, we are actually going to put in our own custom colors. So these little knobs here are called stops, and we're going to double click the black stop, and our color picker appears. And you can pick any color, and it will change all of the blacks to the color that you picked. Down here, we have a little number, and we can type in a color code called a hex code to get a very specific color. So we're going to type in the number 370146. That's going to give us this nice rich purple, and hit OK. Now we're going to double click the white stop, and we're going to type in the number C30185, and then we're going to hit OK. Now I want you to right-click the subject layer and click Convert to Smart Object. What turning this layer into a smart object will do is it will allow us to add filters that will not permanently alter the image. So let's go ahead and add a filter. Before you do that, make sure that your foreground and background are set to the default black foreground and white background. If you don't have this set, it's going to mess with our halftone. So now let's go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and select the halftone pattern. I already have mine selected. Make sure you have the size set to 5, the contrast set to 2, and the pattern type set to dot, and go ahead and hit OK. So now we've incorporated this really nice halftone layer, and right here you'll see the filter right under your smart filters, and you can hide it and show it. You can even double click it to edit it if you wanted to change the numbers and play around with it, and hit OK. All right, now we're going to add some text. So go ahead and grab your type tool. Right now my vertical type tool is the face of the text tool, so I'm going to hold that down and make sure that I have horizontal type tool selected. I'm going to click and drag, and we're going to add some text that is going to go behind our image. And it doesn't matter what you type. I am just going to write, I see you. And in the properties panel, we're going to pick a font. And I'm just going to find a font that's in my recents. I really like a Brill Fat Face italicized. You might not have that typeface, so go ahead and just pick one that you have. And let's change the size. I want it to take up the whole artboard, so let's bump it up to 300. Try 400. Let's do 425 and see how big that gets. We're almost there. All right, 441. I'm going to grab my move tool and move my text to an area that I like. Now, you'll see that this blue bounding box is much bigger than the text itself. You can change that. Double click on the T in the layers panel, and you can make the bounding box smaller so it doesn't take up too much space. I want you to notice something. If I move my text layer above my gradient map, my text is actually black. But once it's moved below the gradient map, it's getting impacted by the colors that I set in the gradient map. So I need you to remember that because that's going to come up in a little bit here. I want my text to be behind the subject. And now I want to add a nice background. I'm going to click this little circle here at the bottom of the layers panel. And I'm going to scroll up and click solid color. Now it doesn't matter what color you choose because the color is getting impacted by the gradient maps. So how do we fix this? We don't want the gradient map or the threshold to impact every single layer below it. We only want it to impact our subject. So I'm going to click threshold. And this little icon here with the square and the arrow pointed down, if I click that, now the threshold only impacts the layer right below it. Now, if I do the same thing with gradient map, the gradient map will only impact the threshold right below it. So now it's not infiltrating on our entire canvas. So now that we've clipped these layers, I can double click my color fill and pick any color that I would like without it getting impacted by the gradient map. However, I actually want to keep the color consistent with the palette I've chosen, and I want this pink. As I drag my cursor off the color picker, it allows me to pick whatever color is anywhere. I can pick gray, like the pasteboard, but I actually want this pink. So all I have to do is click it and hit OK. Now, where did my text go? I had a text box. Now I can't find it. Whenever you think you've lost a layer or an element, go back to your layers panel, maybe make it bigger, and notice that the text is underneath the color fill. We just need to move it up. And now I want my text to be this nice purple color. So I'm going to double click the T icon, and that highlights all my text. I'm going to go to swatches, and I'm going to grab that purple because the purple has been placed in my recent swatches. And we're going to click OK. Now, so far, it looks like a really nice composition. It doesn't feel fully balanced. I'm going to move this box down just a little bit. If I hold down Shift, it will move straight, whereas if I don't hold down Shift, it might move around too much. So click and hold down Shift and bring it down just a little bit. All right, so looking at this composition, I still feel like it's missing something. I think it needs a little more contrast. So I'm going to grab the rectangle shape tool to add a shape in the back. Try to not mix this up with the rectangle marquee tool. That can be a common mistake. So go ahead and just click and drag and make a long rectangle. I'm going off of my artboard. And I think I had my gradient selected because it automatically filled in with a gradient. There are 3 ways that you can change the fill of the rectangle. You have the fill here in the properties panel, here in your options bar, and here in your contextual taskbar. It doesn't matter which one you use. I'm going to click the one in my properties panel, and I do have the gradient option selected. You can also grab swatches and play with the swatches that you have. Up here in the options panel, it kind of looks exactly the same as it did in the properties panel, so it really doesn't matter. If you end up picking a color and then you realize you don't really like it, you can also go back to the rectangle layer here and double click on this little icon in the thumbnail. It looks kind of like a wireframe. Double click that and your color picker will come up. Personally, the color picker is one of my go-to ways of changing colors, and I've already picked out a custom color. So go ahead and assign it the color 3EF0C8. I think a nice teal will go really well with the colors we've chosen. So now I want to rotate the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the rectangle tool while I have the rectangle layer selected. And I'm going to hover over the corner and you'll see this curved arrow. That allows me to rotate the rectangle. I can also adjust the size if I want it to be a thicker boy. I'm going to rotate it some more. Diagonal lines tend to add some nice movement and directional force to keep the composition interesting. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to grab my move tool so I can move it up and down and find out if I'm really happy with the placement. So go ahead and kind of move it around and figure out where you want it placed. I kind of like it right here. Notice that if you move the rectangle tool too far below, you kind of lose the form of our subject's bottom lip. And I really like that, so I want to keep it. And I'm going to move the rectangle here. All right, and there you have it. We've created a poster. You get the halftones inspired by Lichtenstein. You get the bright colors and the threshold and texture inspired by Andy Warhol. And now all we have to do is save it. So I'm going to show you how to save this as a JPEG. Go ahead and go up to File and hit Save as a Copy. Once you hit Save as a Copy, you have to go to Format and select the kind of file type you want. There's so many. Today, let's hit JPEG. And we're gonna go ahead and hit save. You can pick where you wanna save it. If you don't have these folders, again, you can collapse and uncollapse that box to get the folders. I'm just gonna save it right to my desktop. I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. Quality from 10 to 12 is pretty good. We're just gonna hit OK. And we're going to take a look at what this looked like. Now it's on my desktop. We can open it up. And here we have our very own pop art inspired image. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.